The castle doesn't breathe. It waits. Every shadow coiled like a hell breath. Every stone surface cold as a promise never meant to be kept. They say the Vampire King takes what he wants, but no one speaks of what happens when what he wants is a curse wrapped in human skin. That night, beneath a moon that refused to shine, she crossed a threshold she didn't know existed. And when his voice cut to the silence like a blade dipped in honey, she understood. Some fates don't ask for permission. They simply claim. The carriage wheels had stopped turning an hour ago, but Alara's heart hadn't stopped racing since. She pressed her palm against the frosted window, feeling the cold seep through her glove, watching the castle emerge in the mist like a creature rising from deep water. Towers of black stone pierced the sky, their silhouettes sharp enough to cut the clouds. No lights flickered in the windows. No smoke rose from chimneys. The place existed in a state of perpetual midnight. Even though dawn was supposed to break in less than an hour, Miss Hartwell, the coachman's voice trembled. He wouldn't meet her eyes. This is as far as I go. She wanted to argue, to offer more coin, to beg. But his hands were already fumbling with her trunk, dropping it onto the gravel path with a hollow thud that seemed to echo for miles. Before she could speak, he was climbing back onto his seat, whip cracking against cold air, horses lurching forward in panicked retreat. The sound of hoofbeats faded. Silence remained. Alara stood alone before the Castle Noctis, the ancestral seat of the Vampire King whose name was spoken only in whispers, whose face appeared in no paintings, whose existence was confirmed only by the bodies found drained and beautiful at the forest's edge every full moon. She shouldn't be here. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, to follow the coachman's path back down the mountain, to disappear into whatever ordinary life she could salvage. But the letter tucked inside her coat pocket burned like a brand against her ribs. Her sister's handwriting, words smeared with what Alara prayed was ink and not blood. He summoned me. If I don't return in 7 days, don't come looking. Forget you had a sister. Forget my name. Live. That had been 9 days ago. Alara adjusted her cloak, lifted her trunk, lighter than it should be, containing only essentials and one silver dagger she didn't know how to use, and walked toward the castle gates. They opened before she touched them. The groan of ancient hinges, the whisper of metal against stone, and then she was stepping into a courtyard where snow fell upward. She stopped, breath-catching. Delicate flakes drifted from the ground toward the sky, defying gravity, defying reason, each one catching phantom light from nowhere and everywhere at once. You're late. The voice came from shadows that shouldn't exist in an open courtyard. Alara spun, hand instinctively reaching for the dagger at her hip. A woman emerged from the darkness, not walked from it, but materialized, as if the shadows had simply decided to take shape. She was tall, angular, beautiful in a way that suggested broken glass and funeral flowers. Her dress was the color of dried blood, her skin pale as bone, her eyes were completely black, no whites, no iris, just endless void. I wasn't given a time, Alara managed, forcing her voice steady. You were given a summons. The woman circled her slowly, examining. The king does not issue invitations. He issues inevitabilities. You should have arrived the moment you receive his message. I came for my sister. Everyone comes for something. The woman stopped in front of her, tilting her head with unsettling precision, like a bird considering a particularly interesting insect. Very few leave with it. Where is she? Where is Lina? Alive. For now. The woman's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if smiles could carry threats. The king has particular tastes. Your sister proved entertaining. But the king is easily bored, and boredom in this castle is a terminal condition. Rage flared hot in Alara's chest, burning away fear. Take me to him. Oh, he knows you're here. The woman gestured toward the castle's main entrance. Massive doors of dark would carve with scenes Alara couldn't quite focus on. Images that seemed to shift and writhe when she tried to look directly at them. He's known since you stepped onto the mountain path 3 hours ago. He's been anticipating you. The way she said that last word made Alara's skin crawl. What's your name? Alara asked, needing something concrete, something human to hold on to. I was called many things before the king claimed me. Now I'm simply called Witness. I document his acquisitions, catalog his collections, record his pleasures. Witness moved toward the castle doors, her feet making no sound against the stone. Come. He's waiting in the Crimson Hall, and the king's patience is not something to test. The doors opened. Inside, the castle was a labyrinth of impossible architecture. Corridors that angled wrong, staircases that seemed to lead both up and down simultaneously, ceilings so high they disappeared into darkness that pulsed like a living thing. Candles floated in midair, their flames burning blue and green in colors that didn't have names, casting light that revealed too much and nothing at all. They passed rooms filled with mirrors that reflected spaces that weren't there. A library where books chained themselves to shelves, pages turning on their own, whispering secrets in dead languages. A conservatory where flowers bloomed black and silver, their petals sharp as razors, their scent like funeral incense mixed with honey. Elara tried to memorize the path, tried to notice details that might help her escape. But every corridor looked the same and completely different, as if the castle itself was alive and rearranging its insides to confuse her. How long have you been here? Elara asked Witness, desperate for any information. Time moves differently within these walls. I remember arriving. I remember the king's eyes finding mine across a crowded ballroom in Vienna. Or was it Paris? Or London? The cities blur together after centuries. Witness paused before a set of double doors that seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with rhythmic precision. I remember thinking I could resist him. I remember being wrong. Centuries. The king extends life to those he finds useful. He takes it from those he finds tedious. Sometimes he does both simultaneously, just to see what happens. Witness placed her hand against the breathing doors. They sighed open. Welcome to the Crimson Hall. Try not to scream. He fined a cliché. The hall stretched impossibly long, its walls lined with paintings of people frozen in moments of ecstasy and terror, their expressions caught between pleasure and pain, their eyes following Elara as she walked. The floor was polished black marble veined with what looked disturbingly like dried blood, reflecting the enormous chandelier of bones and crystal that hung from the vaulted ceiling. At the far end of the hall, seated on a throne carved from a single massive piece of obsidian, was the Vampire King. He wasn't looking at her. He was examining his hands, long, elegant fingers, pale as moonlight, each movement deliberate and precise as he turned them in the strange light. He wore black, a coat that seemed to absorb light, tailored perfectly to a frame that suggested both grace and lethal strength. His hair was dark, falling just past his shoulders, and even from this distance, Elara could see that his beauty was a kind that didn't comfort. It warned. "Closer," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the massive space, resonating in Elara's chest like a second heartbeat. She forced her legs to move, each step echoing. Each echo feeling like a countdown to something irreversible. Behind her, she heard Witness retreat, the breathing doors sighing shut, sealing her inside. When Elara was 10 feet from the throne, the Vampire King finally looked up. His eyes were red. Not the red of rubies or roses, but the red of fresh arterial blood, of sunsets that promise violence, of things that should never exist in human faces. They fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously naked and seen for the first time in her life. Elara Hartwell. He spoke her name like he was tasting it, deciding whether to savor or spit it out. 23 years old, unmarried, works as a seamstress in the lower district of Ashford, has a sister named Lyanna, 2 years younger, considerably more beautiful, significantly less interesting. Where is she? Elara's voice came out stronger than she felt. The king rose from his throne with liquid grace, descending the 3 steps to the hall floor. He moved like water, like shadow, like something that had forgotten what it meant to be solid. As he approached, Elara noticed details that made her breath catch, the way his coat moved without wind, the way the air around him seemed colder, the way every instinct in her body screamed to run while simultaneously rooting her in place. Your sister is in the East Wing, sleeping off the effect of a particularly indulgent feeding session. She'll wake tomorrow with no memory of what happened here, minus 2 pints of blood, plus enough gold to ensure she never has to work another day in her pathetic little life. He stopped 3 feet from Elara, studying her face with an expression that might have been curiosity if curiosity could kill. She's free to go whenever she wishes. The question is, are you? I came for her. I'm leaving with her. No. The word was absolute, final, carved in stone. You came because you received her letter. You're staying because of what you are. I'm no one. I'm nothing to you. The king moved faster than thought, one moment 3 feet away, the next directly in front of her, his hand suddenly gripping her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. His touch was ice and fire, his proximity suffocating and intoxicating, and Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare into those red eyes that seemed to see through her skin into something deeper. "You're wrong," he whispered, his breath cold against her lips. "You're something I've been searching for across centuries. Something I thought was lost forever. Something that shouldn't exist in this world anymore. I don't understand. You're cursed, Alara Hartwell, marked by magic older than my existence, bound by prophecy I'd almost forgotten, carrying a bloodline I thought I'd extinguished 500 years ago." His thumb traced her lower lip, and she felt her body respond in ways that terrified her. Pulse quickening, breath shortening, something ancient in her blood recognizing something ancient in his. "You're the last descendant of the Morrow Keepers, the bloodline that bound my kind to eternal darkness, that cursed us with hunger that can never truly be satisfied, that made us into monsters." Alara tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, not painfully, but immovably. "That's impossible. My family is nothing. We're seamstresses, farmers, ordinary. Your family has hidden for generations, diluting their blood, burying their history, hoping we'd forget." The king's other hand came up, fingers threading through her hair, forcing her to maintain eye contact. "But I never forget. I've hunted your bloodline across continents, through centuries, eliminating every last Morrow Keeper I could find. And now, after 500 years of searching, the last one walks voluntarily into my castle." Terror finally broke through Alara's paralysis. She jerked backward, and this time he let her go, watching with obvious amusement as she stumbled, caught herself, tried to create distance between them. "You're going to kill me." "Eventually." He said it casually, like discussing the weather, "but not tonight, possibly not for years. You see, Alara, there's a delicious irony in your existence. Your bloodline cursed mine to eternal suffering. And your blood might be the only thing in this world that can actually satisfy my hunger. Not temporarily. Not partially. Completely." He took a step toward her. She took a step back. "I could drain you dry right now. End the Morrow Keeper line forever. Finally break the curse that's plagued my kind for half a millennium. Another step. Another retreat. But where's the pleasure in that? Where's the poetry? Where's the justice in giving you a quick death when your ancestors condemned my entire race to eternal torment?" Alara's back hit the wall. She hadn't realized she'd been retreating that far. Hadn't noticed the king had been herding her away from the doors, into a corner where shadows gathered like spectators. "So here's what's going to happen." He placed one hand on the wall beside her head, leaning in, caging her without quite touching. "You're going to stay here. You're going to live in my castle, eat my food, sleep in my sheets, exist under my protection. And every night, I'm going to take a little bit of your blood, just enough to keep you weak, keep you dependent, keep you alive." That's torture. That's mercy. His face was inches from hers now, his red eyes consuming her vision. "Because the alternative is that I kill you now and spend the next millennium wondering if your blood really could have freed me. This way, we both get what we want. You live. I get to slowly, methodically, exquisitely explore whether the last Morrow Keeper's blood tastes like salvation or just another beautiful lie. And if I refuse, you can't." He smiled then, and it was the most terrifying thing she'd seen in this castle full of terrors, because it was genuine, almost warm, like he was sharing a private joke. "Because you're not just cursed by your bloodline, Alara, you're cursed by something else. Something I recognized the moment you crossed my threshold." "What?" The vampire king pressed her body against his with sudden force, eliminating all space between them. One hand splaying across her lower back, the other still caged beside her head on the wall. She could feel every plane of his cold body against her mortal warmth, could smell him, Ancient paper and winter nights and something indefinable that made her head spin. His lips brushed her ear as he whispered, "Now you're my favorite curse." The words sank into her skin like fangs, and Alara felt something inside her respond. Something that had been sleeping her entire life, suddenly opening its eyes, recognizing the way prey recognizes predator, the way the moon recognizes a tide, the way a match recognizes flame. She gasped, and he pulled back just enough to watch her face, to see the realization dawn in her eyes. "You feel it, don't you?" His voice was almost gentle now, which somehow made it more dangerous. The pull, the recognition, like we've done this before, like we've been doing this forever. "No." "Yes." He released her, stepping back, giving her space that felt more like abandonment than freedom. "Welcome to Castle Noctis, Alara Hartwell. Your sister leaves at dawn. You stay forever. Or until I decide your blood has given me everything I need." He turned and walked toward a side door she hadn't noticed before, his coat trailing behind him like liquid shadow. "Witness will show you to your chambers. Don't try to escape. The castle has a tendency to eat people who wander without permission." He paused at the threshold, glancing back over his shoulder. "Oh, and Alara, sweet dreams. Because starting tomorrow night, I'm going to make sure you never sleep peacefully again." Then he was gone, and Alara was alone in the Crimson Hall, her heart racing, her body trembling, her blood singing with something that felt horrifyingly like recognition. The breathing door sighed open. Witness stood there, expressionless. "Come, your room is prepared." As Alara followed on shaking legs, she touched the place on her back where his hand had pressed, and found her skin was ice cold, as if his touch had left a mark deeper than temperature, deeper than flesh. A mark that whispered, "You belong to him now." And the worst part, the part that made her want to scream, was that some ancient, buried part of her whispered back, "I know. Alara didn't sleep. How could she, in a room where the walls breathed and the ceiling reflected a sky that didn't exist?" Her chambers were beautiful in the way poisonous things are beautiful. Velvet curtains the color of fresh bruises, a four-poster bed carved from black, but with posts that twisted like frozen screams, mirrors that showed her reflection a half-second too late, as if her image had to travel from somewhere distant to catch up with her body. She'd spent the night sitting in a chair by the window, though calling it a window felt generous. It was more an opening in the stone that looked out onto nothing, not darkness, not fog, nothing. A void so complete it made her eyes hurt to look at it for too long. When dawn came, or what passed for dawn in this place, the nothing outside her window turned a shade of gray that suggested light existed somewhere, just not here. A knock at her door. Not Witness's cold precision, but something softer. "Come in," Alara said, her voice rough from disuse. The door opened to reveal a girl who couldn't have been more than 16, carrying a silver tray with breakfast. She had warm brown skin, dark curly hair pulled back with ribbon, and eyes that were entirely too alive for this place. Human eyes. Mortal eyes. "Good morning, miss." The girl set the tray on the small table near the window. "I'm Mira. I'll be attending to you during your stay." Stay. Such a gentle word for imprisonment. "You're human," Alara said, studying her. "Yes, miss." Mira began uncovering dishes, fresh bread, honey, tea that smelled of herbs Alara couldn't identify. "There are 12 of us living in the castle. Servants. The king keeps us comfortable. Why do you stay?" Myra's hand stilled over the teapot. When she looked up, Alara saw something old in those young eyes. "Because out there," she gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the nothing beyond, "I was starving. My family was dying. The king offered me a choice, slow death by poverty, or a life here where I'm fed, clothed, and only occasionally terrified." She poured tea with steady hands. "It's not the choice I wanted, miss, but it's the choice I made." Alara wanted to argue, to say that freedom was worth starvation, but the words died in her throat. Who was she to judge survival? Has he? Alara couldn't finish the question. "Fed for me?" Mira stirred honey into the tea. "Twice. Once when I first arrived, to seal the contract. Once last winter, when I accidentally walked into the East Wing at midnight and saw something I shouldn't have. She touched her neck, where Alara could just make out 2 small scars. It doesn't hurt as much as you'd think. The pain comes after, when you remember how good it felt while it was happening. The door opened again without knocking. Witness entered, her black eyes sweeping the room with mechanical precision. The king requests your presence in his study at noon. Her gaze fixed on Alara with the intensity of a collector examining a new specimen. Where the dress laid out on your bed. Do not be late. She left as abruptly as she'd arrived. Mira exhaled slowly. That's your cue to eat quickly, miss. When Witness says noon, she means noon exactly. Time moves strangely here, but the king's schedule is absolute. The dress was black silk that moved like water, cut in a style that was simultaneously modest and revealing. High collar, long sleeves, but the fabric clung to every curve as if it had been sewn directly onto her body by someone who knew her measurements better than she did. When Alara looked at herself in the mirror, she saw a stranger, someone who belonged in this castle of beautiful horrors. Mira led her through corridors that Alara was certain weren't the same ones from last night. They passed a room where paintings were painting themselves, brushes moving through empty air, creating landscapes of places that felt like memories of dreams. They passed a gallery of sculptures that turned their heads to watch them walk by, stone eyes tracking with unsettling awareness. Finally, they reached a door dark carved with symbols that seemed to rearrange themselves when Alara tried to focus on them. His study, Mira whispered. I'll wait here. When you're finished, I'll take you back to your chambers. The assumption that she'd need guidance back, that she'd be in no state to find her own way, made Alara's stomach clench. She knocked. Enter. The study was smaller than the Crimson Hall, but somehow more intimate in its darkness. Bookshelves lined every wall from floor to ceiling, filled with volumes in languages Alara recognized and dozens she didn't. A fire burned in an ornate hearth, black flames that gave off cold instead of heat, and behind a massive desk carved from a single piece of petrified would sat the Vampire King. He looked different in daylight, or whatever pale illumination filtered through the study's tall windows. Less like a nightmare, more like a memory of something holy that had been corrupted. He was reading a book, his elegant fingers turning pages with careful precision, and for a moment he looked almost human. Then he glanced up, and his red eyes shattered the illusion. Alara, punctual. I appreciate that. He closed the book. Alara glimpsed the title in a language she thought might be Latin or something older, and stood. How was your first night in my castle? Sleepless. I'm not surprised. The castle takes time to accept new residents. It's alive, you see. Not in the way you're alive, but alive nonetheless. Built on a convergence of ley lines, fed by centuries of blood and magic and suffering. It has preferences. He moved around the desk, each step deliberate. It's decided it likes you. That's rare. Usually it tries to drive people mad within the first week. How comforting. A smile ghosted across his lips. Sarcasm. Good. I was worried you'd be broken already. Broken things are tedious. He stopped a few feet from her, studying her face with that unnerving intensity. Your sister left this morning. I gave her enough gold to ensure a comfortable life, along with compulsion to forget everything that happened here. She'll remember coming to the castle, remember leaving safely. Everything between will be fog. Relief and grief tangled in Alara's chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. It's not mercy. It's practicality. Your sister was ordinary, pretty but empty, like a music box that plays the same tune endlessly. You, however... He reached out, and Alara forced herself not to flinch as his cold fingers traced her jawline. You're full of songs I haven't heard before. What do you want from me? Tonight, I want your blood. Tomorrow night, your blood again. Every night after that, the same. But right now, in this moment, his hand dropped away. I want you to understand what you are. Come. He walked to one of the bookshelves and pulled a volume, so old the leather binding was cracked and flaking. He opened it carefully, turning pages until he found what he sought, then held out to her. The text was in English. Thank God, though the style was archaic. But it was the illustration that made Alera's breath catch, a drawing of a woman with her hands raised, light pouring from her palms, and around her, shadowy figures writhing in pain. The Moral Keepers, the king said softly. Your ancestors. 500 years ago, they were the most powerful order of light mages in existence. They believed vampires were an abomination, a corruption of the natural order, so they crafted a curse. His finger traced the text below the illustration. They bound our kind to eternal hunger, ensuring we could never be satisfied, never be at peace. They made us into the monsters they believed we were. Alera read the text, her heart sinking with each word. They cursed you to burn in sunlight, to be repelled by holy symbols. To need blood not just for survival, but as an addiction that can never be satisfied. Correct. Before the curse, we were simply immortal beings who needed blood to live. No different than humans needing food. We could walk in daylight. We could enter churches. We could feel satisfied after feeding. His voice was cold now, empty. The Moral Keepers took that from us. They turned existence into torture. So you hunted them. I slaughtered them. No emotion in his voice, just fact. Every Moral Keeper I could find, I killed. Some quickly, some very, very slowly. I burned their libraries, destroyed their temples, scattered their bloodline to the winds. I thought I'd succeeded. 5 centuries of silence, no rumors, no whispers of their magic. He closed the book with a soft thud. And then you walked into my castle, and I felt it immediately. That spark of their power in your blood. Alera's hand shook. I don't have magic. I've never done anything supernatural in my life. Because your ancestors suppressed it, diluted it, hid it so thoroughly that even you don't know it's there. He set the book aside and gripped her shoulders, his touch ice cold through the silk. But I know. I've spent 500 years hunting Moral Keeper blood. I can sense it the way sharks sense blood in water from miles away. If you hate my bloodline so much, why not just kill me? Because hatred isn't the only thing I feel. His grip tightened slightly. There's a prophecy, Alera, one the Moral Keepers themselves spoke of before I destroyed them. They said that when the last of their bloodline met the eldest vampire, one of 2 things would happen. Either she would be his destruction, or she would be his salvation. The curse would either be completed or broken. The word settled over Alera like a shroud. That's why you're keeping me alive. You want to know which one I am. I want to find out if your blood can break what your ancestors built. He released her, stepping back, and there's only one way to discover that. He moved so quickly she didn't see it. One moment standing across from her, the next directly behind her, one arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. His other hand swept her hair aside, exposing her neck, and she felt his breath cold against her skin. Wait. Sure. His lips brushed her ear. Fighting makes it hurt more. Surrender makes it something else entirely. She felt his fangs pierce her neck before she felt the pain. A sharp, bright shock that made her gasp. Then the pain melted into something confusing. Something that felt like warmth spreading through her veins. Like being submerged in bathwater. Like the moment before sleep takes you under. Her knees weakened. His arm tightened around her waist, holding her upright as he drank. Alera's vision blurred. She was aware of her heartbeat, too loud, too fast, aware of something being pulled from her body, not just blood, but something deeper, something essential. Images flooded her mind, not her memories, but his. She saw centuries compressed into moments. Ballrooms full of dancers dressed in styles she didn't recognize, battlefields soaked in blood, a woman with kind eyes telling a small dark-haired boy that he was special, that same boy decades later standing over her grave, unchanged while she rotted. She saw herself through his eyes, not as she was now, but as something older, something wearing her face but dressed in robes of white and gold, hands raised and glowing with power, mouth open in words that became a curse, that became a binding, that became his eternal prison. I know you, her ancient self said in his memory. I know what you'll become. This is mercy. Then the vision shattered as he withdrew his fangs, and Alera collapsed. He caught her, lowering them both to the floor with surprising gentleness. She lay in his arms, too weak to move, too dizzy to think clearly, aware of his hand stroking her hair with something almost like tenderness. "Extraordinary," he whispered. "Your blood tastes like starlight and ash, like forgiveness and damnation, like—" He trailed off, his red eyes wide with something that might have been wonder, like possibility. What was that?" Illyria's voice was barely audible. "Those visions, the blood connection. When I feed from you, our minds touch. You see my memories. I see." He paused, considering. "I see what you could have been, what you should have been, if your ancestors hadn't hidden you away." He lifted her carefully, carrying her to a velvet couch near the coal-burning fire. He laid her down and disappeared for a moment, returning with a crystal glass filled with dark red liquid. "Drink. It's wine mixed with iron and herbs. It'll help you recover." She wanted to refuse, but her body was screaming for something, anything, to fill the emptiness his feeding had left behind. She took the glass with trembling hands and drank. It tasted like copper and cherries and something medicinal, but warmth immediately spread through her limbs. The king sat in a chair across from her, watching her with that unsettling intensity. "Every night," he said quietly, "I'll feed from you every night. And every night, I'll take a little more, push a little deeper, until I understand exactly what you are. Until I know if you're my destruction or salvation. And if you're my destruction?" Illyria asked, her voice stronger now. "Did you ever consider that?" Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "No, I didn't. Because in 500 years, nothing has destroyed me. Nothing has even come close." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But you're welcome to try, Illyria Hartwell. It might make things more interesting." She finished the wine, feeling strength returning to her body, and met his gaze directly. "I want to know your name." "Why?" "Because if I'm going to be your prisoner, your curse, your experiment, I at least deserve to know what to call you beyond the king." He was silent for a long moment, and Illyria thought he might refuse. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. "Theron. My name is Theron." "Theron," she repeated, tasting the name. "How old are you?" "Old enough to have forgotten most of what it means to be human. Old enough to have watched civilizations rise and fall. Old enough to have lost count of how many people I've killed." He stood, moving to the window, his silhouette dark against the pale light. "Old enough to be very, very tired, Illyria." The vulnerability in those last words caught her off guard. For just a moment, he didn't sound like a monster. He sounded like someone who'd been alive too long, who'd seen too much, who carried the weight of centuries and wanted desperately to set it down. "Your ancestors cursed me with eternal hunger," Theron said, still facing the window. "But they gave me something worse than that. They gave me eternal consciousness. No rest, no peace, no moments where I stop thinking, stop remembering, stop being aware of every single mistake I've made across 500 years. He turned back to her, and his red eyes were somehow softer. "So, yes, Illyria, I'm using you. I'm feeding from you. I'm keeping you here against your will. But understand this. If your blood can break this curse, if you can give me even one moment of true satisfaction, one moment of peace." He crossed back to her, kneeling in front of the couch so they were eye level. "I will give you anything you want. Your freedom, riches, power, even my death, if that's what you desire." Illyria searched his face, looking for deception, but found only exhaustion and a desperate, terrifying hope. "What if I can't break it?" she asked. "What if I'm just a descendant, just carrying diluted blood that doesn't have the power you need? Then I'll drain you dry eventually and spend the next 500 years hating myself for wasting the most interesting person I've met in centuries." He reached up and touched her face gently, his thumb brushing away at tears she hadn't realized had fallen. "But I don't think that's what will happen. I think you're going to be either my salvation or my destruction. And honestly, Illyria, at this point, I'd welcome either." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. She took it, his cold fingers wrapping around her warm ones. "Mira will take you back to your chambers. Rest. Eat. Tomorrow night, we'll do this again. And the night after. And the night after. He walked her to the door, opened it to reveal Mira waiting outside exactly where she'd been before. Welcome to eternity, Illyra, or what's left of mine. As Mira led her through the twisting corridors back to her chambers, Illyra touched the wound on her neck, already closed, leaving only the faintest mark. She thought about his memories, about the vision of her ancestor cursing him, about the exhaustion in his ancient eyes, and she realized something that terrified her more than being his prisoner. She was starting to understand him. Worse, she was starting to feel sorry for him. And worst of all, some part of her wanted to be his salvation, not his destruction. God help me, she thought. I'm falling into this curse willingly. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt both eternal and impossibly brief. Every night, Theron would summon her to different parts of the castle. Sometimes a study, sometimes a library, once to a tower room where the walls were covered in astronomical charts marking stars that no longer existed. He would talk to her for hours about history she'd never learned, about empires that had crumbled before a country was even named, about art and music and philosophy from ages she couldn't fathom. Then he would feed. Each time, the blood connection grew stronger. She saw more of his memories. The child he'd been, human and vulnerable, watching his mother die of plague while he held her hand. The moment of his turning, when a female vampire with eyes like ice had offered him a choice, death or eternal life. The decades of learning what he'd become, the joy of discovering his power, the slow horror of realizing he would watch everyone he loved age and die, while he remained unchanging. And she saw the night the Moral Keepers cursed him. She relived it through his eyes, standing in a circle of mages, their white robes glowing with stolen sunlight, their voices chanting in unison while her ancestor, a woman who wore Illyra's own face, pressed her palm to his chest and spoke words that burned like brands into his very soul. You who feast on life shall never be sated. You who hide in darkness shall burn in light. You who steal breath shall choke on your own immortality. This is the price of your existence. This is the curse that binds you. She felt his agony as the curse took hold, felt his hunger multiply tenfold, felt the sun that had once warmed his skin become poison, felt satisfaction drain from his body like water through cracks in stone. And she felt his rage, the rage that led him to break free of their binding, to hunt each mage down one by one, to make their deaths slow enough that they had time to regret every word of their curse. Each time she witnessed these memories, Illyra woke in her chambers with tears on her face and a terrible, gnawing question. If I had been in their position, would I have done differently? It was the beginning of her 4th week, when everything changed. She was in the castle's greenhouse, a space Mira had shown her where impossible plants grew in soil that glowed faintly with phosphorescence. Illyra had taken to spending her afternoons here, among the black roses and silver orchids, finding strange comfort in their poisonous beauty. She was sketching one of the flowers. Her seamstress training had given her a good eye for detail. When she heard footsteps that weren't Myra's light tread or Witness's precise click. You draw. Theron's voice. She turned to find him standing at the greenhouse entrance, somehow both out of place and perfectly suited to this environment of beautiful, deadly things. He wore a simple black shirt today, no coat, his dark hair tied back loosely. It was the most casual she'd ever seen him, the most human. I sketch, she corrected. I'm not an artist. Show me. She hesitated, then handed him her sketchbook. He leafed through pages slowly. Her drawings of the castle, of flowers, of Mira sleeping in a chair by the fire, of the view from her window onto nothing. He stopped at the last drawing. It was him. She'd drawn him from memory one sleepless night. His profile as he looked reading in his study, the line of his jaw, the fall of his hair, the intense focus in his expression. She'd captured something in that sketch, something she hadn't even realized she'd seen. Loneliness. You made me look almost human, he said quietly. You are. Sometimes. The words escaped before she could stop them. When you forget to be the monster. He looked up at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. That's dangerous thinking, Illyra. Why? Because monsters are predictable. Humans are... He handed back the sketchbook, his fingers brushing hers. Complicated. He moved deeper into the greenhouse, examining the plants with genuine interest. Did you know vampires can't eat regular food? It tastes like ash. But certain plants, ones that grow in darkness, ones fed by blood, those we can taste. These flowers, for instance, if I were to eat one of these petals, I'd taste moonlight and poison and something almost like joy. Have you tried? Once, centuries ago, I wanted to remember what flavor felt like. He plucked a petal from one of the black roses, held it up to the strange light. It was beautiful and terrible, and it made me sick for 3 days. Worth it, though, for those few seconds of remembering. Ilera watched him study the petal with something like reverence, and felt her heart do something complicated and unwelcome in her chest. "Why are you here?" she asked. "You don't usually come to me during the day." "I wanted to see you without the ritual of feeding, without the power dynamic of summoning and obeying." He looked at her directly. "I wanted to see if we could just be what?" Two beings in a greenhouse, talking about flowers. He smiled slightly. "Is that allowed?" Despite everything, the imprisonment, the feeding, the curse, Ilera found herself smiling back. "I think we can manage that." They spent the afternoon among the poisonous plants, talking about things that didn't matter. The architecture of the greenhouse, the properties of various deadly flowers, a debate about whether beauty required danger or if gentle things could be equally beautiful. It was the most normal afternoon Ilera had spent since arriving, and that terrified her more than any feeding session, because she was starting to like him, not the vampire king, not Theron the ancient predator, but the person underneath, the one who got excited talking about botanical properties, who touched flower petals with reverence, who looked at her sketches like they mattered. That night, when he summoned her for feeding, something had shifted between them. He didn't grab her immediately. Instead, he poured them both wine, hers laced with iron, his with blood, and they sat across from each other to study like old friends. "I've been thinking about your question," Theron said, swirling his wine thoughtfully, "about whether you're my destruction or salvation. And I think it might be both." He set down his glass. "I think you might destroy who I've been in order to save who I could become, or vice versa." The prophecy never specified which came first. Ilera sipped her wine, feeling the warmth spread through her. The nightly feedings had left her perpetually tired, perpetually on the edge of weakness, but she'd grown accustomed to it. Her body had adjusted, learning to function in a state of beautiful depletion. "What if there's a third option?" she asked. "What option? What if I'm neither? What if I'm just a woman with cursed blood who ended up in the wrong castle?" Theron laughed, a real laugh, rich and surprised. "Then fate has a crueler sense of humor than I gave it credit for." He stood, and she knew the talking portion of the evening was over. But instead of his usual clinical approach to feeding, he held out his hand. "Dance with me first." "What?" "I want to remember what it's like to dance. Before I feed, before the blood connection tangles our thoughts together." His hand remained extended, patient. "Please." There was no music, but Ilera took his hand anyway, letting him pull her into a waltz position. His hand on her waist was cold but gentle. His other hand held hers with surprising care, as if she were something precious, something that might break. They moved together in silence, creating their own rhythm, and Ilera realized this was more intimate than the feeding, this quiet dance is study, with no audience, no ceremony, just two beings moving in synchronization. "I haven't danced since I was human," Theron said softly, his breath cold against her temple. "I've forgotten how it feels to lead and be led simultaneously. The trust required to let someone guide your movements." "Is that what we're doing?" Ilera asked. "Trusting each other? I don't know, but I'd like to try." The dance slowed, became less about movement and more about standing together, swaying slightly, existing in each other's space. Ilera felt her heartbeat sync with something in him. Not a heartbeat. His heart hadn't beaten in 5 centuries, but some deeper rhythm that pulsed through his cold body. "I'm going to feed now," he whispered. "But I want you to know something first." "What?" "You're not just an experiment anymore. You're not just Moral Keeper blood. You're..." He paused, as if the words cost him something. "You're becoming important to me in ways I didn't anticipate. In ways I'm not sure I should allow." Before Alara could respond, his fangs found her neck. But this time was different. This time, when their minds connected through blood, it wasn't just his memories flooding into her. It was her memories flooding into him. He saw her childhood, saw her in Lyanna playing a field of actual flowers, saw her mother teaching her to sew, saw the day her parents died and how she'd held Lyanna through the night whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. He saw her loneliness, her fear that she'd never be more than ordinary, her secret dreams of adventure that she'd buried under practicality and responsibility. And he saw the moment 3 weeks ago when she'd first started to see him as more than a monster, when he'd talk about art with genuine passion, and she'd realize that loneliness transcended mortality. When he withdrew his fangs, they were both breathing hard, her from blood loss, him from whatever emotion he'd just experienced. "I saw," he said, his voice rough. "I saw you." And Alara managed, her head spinning. "And you're so much lonelier than I realized. So much braver than you know. So much more than you've ever let yourself be." He pulled back to look at her face, his red eyes intense. "Your ancestors try to hide you from me, to bury your magic so deep you'd never know it existed. But Alara," his hand came up to cup her face, "it's waking up." "What do you mean?" "Your blood is changing. Every time I feed, every time our connection deepens, your dormant magic responds. In another week, maybe 2, it's going to break through the suppressions your ancestors built. And when it does..." He looked almost afraid. "You're going to have to choose." "Choose what?" "Whether to complete your ancestors' curse and destroy me, or to break it and free me." He touched her neck wound gently, his fingers coming away with a trace of her blood. "And I'm terrified, Alara, because I don't know which one you'll choose. Worse, I don't know which one I want you to choose anymore." He stepped away from her, creating distance, and Alara could see the conflict in his expression. Desire and fear, hope and resignation, all warring across his ancient face. "Go," he said, his voice rough. "Go back to your chambers. Tomorrow night, we'll talk about what happens next. Tonight, I need to think about what I'm doing, what we're doing, what this has become." Alara left on shaking legs, Mira appearing from nowhere to guide her back. And as she walked through the twisted corridors, she felt it, a warmth in her chest that hadn't been there before, like something sleeping was beginning to stretch and wake. Her magic, her curse, her choice. She didn't sleep that night either. She sat by her window, staring into nothing, feeling the warmth in her chest grow stronger, spreading through her veins like sunlight through ice. And she realized something that changed everything. She didn't want to destroy Theron. She didn't want to complete her ancestors' curse. She wanted to break it, not because it was right or just her good, but because somewhere in the past 3 weeks, between the feedings and conversations and the quiet moments in greenhouses and studies, she started to care about the monster who danced with her in silence. "I'm falling in love with my captor," she thought, "with a vampire king who's killed thousands, with the very being my ancestors cursed. And the worst part? She wasn't sure it was the curse making her feel this way. She was afraid it was real." The castle felt different the next morning. Alara woke to find that nothing outside her window had been replaced by stars. Impossible stars that shone in broad daylight, that pulsed with colors she couldn't name, that seemed to whisper directly into her mind. "Wake up," they said. "Wake up, wake up, wake up." She pressed her hand to her chest and felt it immediately. Power, not the subtle warmth from yesterday, but something vast and terrible and beautiful burning inside her like a sun trying to be born. Her ancestor suppression had broken during the night. She was a moral keeper now. Fully. Finally. Completely. Mira burst into her chambers without knocking, her human eyes wide with fear and wonder. "Miss Alara, you're glowing." Alara looked down and saw it was true. Her skin emitted a faint golden light, like someone had replaced her blood with liquid dawn. "I need to see Theron," Alara said, her voice strange to her own ears, resonated with something otherworldly. "He's forbidden anyone from disturbing him. He locked himself in the throne room last night and hasn't emerged. Witness says he's afraid of what might happen when he sees you again. Afraid. The vampire king was afraid. Of her." Alara stood, and the movement felt different, lighter, stronger, as if gravity had less hold on her than before. Take me to him anyway. Miss, I can't. Mira. Illyria looked at her and saw the girl flinch. Please, this is important. Something in Illyria's glowing eyes must have convinced her, because Mira nodded and led her through corridors that seemed to part before them, as if the castle itself was helping, as if even this ancient structure of blood and darkness wanted to see what would happen when light and shadow finally collided. They reached the throne room, those massive doors that breathed, that pulsed with the castle's heartbeat. Witness stood guard, her black eyes widening slightly when she saw Illyria's transformation. He said no one enters. He'll want to see me. Illyria said with certainty she didn't fully understand. He needs to see me. Witness studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. If this ends badly, if you destroy him, the castle will eat you alive. It loves its king. If I destroy him, Illyria said quietly, the castle can have me. She pushed open the breathing doors. Inside, the Crimson Hall was darker than she'd ever seen it. All the floating candles extinguished, the chandelier bones hanging motionless, the paintings on the walls turned to face the wall like they couldn't bear to watch. At the far end, seated on his obsidian throne, was Theron. He looked wrong. His usual composed elegance had fractured into something rawer. His coat was gone, his shirt half unbuttoned, his dark hair falling loose around his face. His red eyes tracked her approach with the intensity of a predator and the wariness of prey. You're awake, he said, his voice hollow. I can feel it. Your magic. It's like standing in front of the sun. Illyria crossed the hall, each step echoing, each echo somehow louder than the last. The golden light emanating from her skin grew brighter as she approached, until shadows fled from her presence, until the darkness that usually dominated this space retreated to the corners and clung there uncertain. She stopped at the base of his throne, looking up at him. I know what I need to do, she said. Then do it. He gripped the arms of his throne so tightly the obsidian cracked. Either complete your ancestors' curse and end me, or break it and free me. But decide, Illyria, because standing in your presence right now is agony. Your magic is light, and I am darkness, and every instinct I have is screaming at me to either kill you or... He stopped, jaw clenching. Or what? Or fall to my knees and beg you to save me. His red eyes blazed. And I haven't knelt for anyone in 500 years. Illyria felt her magic surge at his words, felt the power inside her responding to the curse she could now sense in him. A dark, writhing thing wrapped around his soul like chains, like thorns, like a parasite that had been feeding on him for centuries. She could destroy him. She felt the knowledge in her bones, inherited from her ancestors. One word in the old language, one focused burst of her newly awakened power, and she could burn him to ash. Complete the Moral Keeper's curse. Eliminate the monster. She could also break the curse. She felt that possibility too, shimmering like a second option. It would hurt, would require her to pour her own life force into unraveling 5 centuries of binding magic. But she could do it. Free him. Save him. Give him the peace he'd been denied for so long. 2 choices. Destruction or salvation. Her ancestors' revenge or her own compassion. Stand up, she said. What? Stand up. Come down here. I'm not doing this while you're on a throne, and I'm below you. We're equals in this. Theron, whatever happens next, we face it at the same level. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then, slowly, he stood and descended the steps, and for the first time since they'd met, they stood face to face with nothing between them. No power dynamics, no rituals, just 2 beings whose fates have been tangled together by ancient magic and modern circumstance. I've made my choice, Illyria said. His jaw tightened. Tell me. Instead of answering with words, she reached up and touched his face, her warm, glowing hand against his cold, pale skin. He flinched but didn't pull away, his red eyes searching hers desperately. I choose, Illyria said, feeling tears burn her eyes, to break the curse. The relief that flooded his expression was so raw it hurt to witness. Why? Because my ancestors were wrong. They saw you as monsters and treated you as such, and in doing so, they created the very thing they feared. They cursed you with eternal hunger and then called you gluttonous. They burned you with sunlight and then called you creatures of darkness. They denied you satisfaction, and then condemned you for seeking it endlessly. Her other hand came up to frame his face. But I've seen your memories, Theron. I've seen who you were before the curse, and who you've become despite it. You're not a monster. You're someone who's been in pain for 500 years, and is still trying to find moments of beauty, still trying to remember what it means to dance. Illyria, I choose you, she whispered, not because the curse compels me, not because fate demands it, but because in 3 weeks, you've shown me more genuine humanity than most humans I've known in 23 years. Because you're lonely and exhausted, and you deserve peace. Because when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I never have before. She saw something break in his expression, some final wall he'd been maintaining, some last offense against hope. This will hurt you, he said roughly. Breaking the curse will require your life force. It might kill you. I know. I can't. I won't let you. It's not your choice. She smiled, even as tears tracked down her glowing cheeks. I'm a moral keeper, Theron. This is my magic, my power, my decision. My ancestors used it to bind you. I'm using it to free you. Before he could protest further, she pressed her forehead to his and let her magic pour out. It was like cutting open her own chest and pouring molten gold directly into his darkness. She felt the curse immediately, a massive, complex working of binding magic that had wrapped itself around every part of his being, that had rewritten the fundamental nature of his existence. And she began to unravel it. Thread by thread, word by word, she undid 5 centuries of her ancestors' work. She burned away the compulsion that made sunlight poison. She dissolved the binding that kept him eternally hungry. She shattered the chains that prevented satisfaction, peace, rest. It hurt. God, it hurt. Every thread she severed felt like cutting into her own soul. Every binding she dissolved drained more of her life force. She felt herself growing weaker, felt the golden light beginning to flicker, felt her heartbeat slowing as she poured everything she was into saving him. Theron tried to pull away. She felt him fighting it, felt his hands on her shoulders trying to create distance, but she held on with strength she didn't know she possessed. Let me finish, she gasped. Please, let me finish. You're dying. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper now. But you'll live. Really live. And that's worth it. The last thread snapped. The curse broke. Illyria felt the moment it happened. Felt 5 centuries of binding magic shadow like glass. Felt Theron's agonized gasp as sensations he'd forgotten flooded back into his body. Felt the darkness that had caged him dissolve into nothing. She also felt herself falling. Her legs gave out, her magic guttering like a dying candle, her life force nearly depleted. But before she hit the ground, Theron caught her, lowering them both to the floor, cradling her in his arms with gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so ancient and powerful. No, he said, his voice breaking. No, no, no. Illyria, stay with me. Stay with me. She tried to speak, but couldn't find the breath. The golden light had faded from her skin, leaving her pale and cold, her heartbeat stuttering irregularly. What have you done? Theron's hands were shaking as he held her. What have you done, you beautiful, foolish, impossible woman? With the last of her strength, Illyria reached up and touched his face one more time. Freed you, she managed. Then her hand fell. Her eyes closed. Her heart stopped. Silence. Theron held Illyria's lifeless body, feeling something he hadn't felt in 500 years, complete, absolute, devastating grief. The curse was broken. He could feel it immediately. The constant hunger gone, replaced by satisfied stillness. The burning sensitivity to sunlight vanished, leaving only neutral awareness. The inability to rest dissolved. And for the first time in centuries, he felt like he could actually sleep if he chose to. She'd freed him. And it had killed her. No, the word came out raw, primal. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to save me and then leave. He bit into his own wrist, tearing deep, and pressed a wound to her lips. Drink. Drink, damn you. Vampire blood could heal mortal wounds, could extend life, could do many things, but it couldn't revive the dead. He knew this. He'd known it for centuries. But he tried anyway, forcing his ancient blood past her lips, willing her to swallow, to come back, to breathe. Nothing. Her body remained still. Her heart remained silent. Theron pressed his face against her hair and made a sound he didn't recognize. Something between a scream and a sob. Something that came from a place in him he'd thought was dead. "I was supposed to be the monster," he whispered against her temple. "I was supposed to be the one who destroyed. But you destroyed me completely by choosing to save me. How am I supposed to exist in a world where you showed me I could be more than what the curse made me, and then took yourself away before I could show you what that meant?" The throne room remained silent. The paintings stayed turned to the wall. Even the castle itself seemed to mourn, its breathing walls going still, its heartbeat slowing in sympathy. Theron held Alara's body and felt something he'd forgotten existed: powerlessness. He was a vampire king, ancient and terrible and strong, and he couldn't save the one person who'd actually mattered. Then he felt it, a flutter, so faint he thought he'd imagined it. But there, against his chest where her heart pressed close, the smallest pulse. He froze, not daring to breathe, not daring to hope. Another flutter, stronger this time. "Ilara?" His voice cracked on her name. Her fingers twitched against his chest. Her eyelids moved, and then, impossibly miraculously, her eyes opened. They weren't their normal brown anymore. They glowed faintly gold, like embers that refused to die completely. "Theron." Her voice was barely audible. "You're alive." He couldn't keep the shock from his voice. "How are you alive?" "You gave everything." "Not everything." She managed a weak smile. "Moral keeper magic. It regenerates. Slowly. I'll be weak for weeks, maybe months. But I'll live." She touched his face, and he realized there were tears on his cheeks. Red tears, blood tears, but tears nonetheless. "Why are you crying?" "Because you died," he said roughly. "For 3 minutes your heart stopped beating and he couldn't finish the sentence." "You felt something," she whispered. "I felt everything." He pulled her closer, careful of her weakness. "The curse is broken, Ilara. I can feel satisfaction. I can feel peace. I can feel—" He looked down at her, his red eyes intense. "I can feel love. Real love. Not the shadow of it I remember from my human life. And the first thing I felt if it was you, and you were dead in my arms, and I wanted to burn the entire world down for taking you from me." Ilara's golden eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry I scared you. Don't apologize. Just promise me you'll stay alive. Promise me you'll recover. Promise me." His voice broke. "Promise me I get time with you. Real time, not as your captor and prisoner, but as whatever we can be to each other." "I promise," she whispered. He kissed her forehead gently, reverently, like she was something holy. And maybe she was the woman who'd broken a 500-year curse, who'd chosen compassion over revenge, who'd seen a monster and decided to save it anyway. "What happens now?" Ilara asked. Theron looked around the throne room, at the painting still turned away, at the darkness clinging to corners, at the obsidian throne that suddenly seemed like a relic of a life he no longer wanted. "Now," he said slowly, "we figure out what it means to be free. Both of us." He adjusted his hold on her, standing with her cradled in his arms. "You've been a prisoner here for 3 weeks. I've been a prisoner of the curse for 5 centuries. Maybe it's time we both learned what freedom actually feels like." He carried her out of the throne room, through corridors that began to brighten as they passed, the castle responding to change in its king, to the breaking of the curse that had shaped its very architecture. Witness appeared in their path, her black eyes widening as she saw Ilara alive, and Theron's expression transformed. "The curse?" Witness asked. "Broken," Theron said simply. "And her?" "Alive. Recovering. Under my protection. Under my—" He looked down at Ilara's face, at her gold-glowing eyes, at the slight smile on her lips. "Under my heart. Witness. She's under my heart now." Witness did something Ilara had never seen. She smiled. A real, genuine smile that made her look almost human. "It's about time, my king. It's about time." 3 months later, Ilara stood at the window of her chambers. No longer a prisoner's room, but a space she'd chosen to stay in, that she'd fill with her sketches and flowers from the greenhouse and books from the library. The nothing outside had been replaced by a real view, mountains and forests, and, in the distance, the town where she'd grown up. The curse's breaking had lifted more than just Theron's bindings. It had lifted the darkness that had cloaked the entire castle. She heard footsteps and turned to see Theron enter. He looked different these days, not younger exactly, but lighter. The exhaustion that had lived in his eyes for centuries had faded. He smiled more easily. He laughed at small things. He was learning, slowly, what it meant to be free. "You're ready?" he asked. She nodded. Today was the day she decided to visit her sister, to see Lyanna and make sure she was safe and happy. Theron had offered to accompany her, to show the town that the Vampire King was no longer the monster they'd feared. "Are you nervous?" Elara asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "I haven't walked among humans as anything other than a predator in I can't remember how long. What if they reject me? What if they're right to?" Elara crossed him and took his hand. "Then we'll figure out together. That's what freedom means, Theron. The freedom to fail. The freedom to try. The freedom to be uncertain and scared, and still choose to move forward anyway." He looked down at their joined hands, her warm skin against his, which was no longer cold but merely cool, his body temperature regulating normally now that the curse was gone. "I love you," he said. "I don't know if I said it clearly enough, without metaphor or poetry or dancing around the truth. I love you, Elara Hartwell. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. I love you, too," she said, pulling him close. "My favorite curse." He laughed at that, the sound rich and real. "Is that what I am?" "No," she corrected, kissing him softly. "You were my curse. Now you're my choice. And that's infinitely better." They left Castle Noctis hand in hand, walking down the mountain path toward the town, toward uncertain futures and possibilities neither of them could predict. Behind them, the castle's windows glowed warm for the first time in 500 years. And above them, the sun rose without burning. Freedom, they discovered, felt a lot like falling and flying simultaneously, terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely worth every risk. The curse was broken. The story was just beginning.